What's going on, guys? Whelp Cards in the house, and today I'm coming to you with my Buster Blader deck. That's right. And by the way, check out this nice playmat. I just picked this up today, actually, and I had to pick it up because I saw Yugi on it, and you already know Buster Blader is one of Yugi's favorites, and it's one of my favorites as well. So without further ado, let's get started, guys. So first of all, I like to run 3 copies of Buster Blader. Now, Buster Blader's effect is the attack of this card increases by 500 points for every Dragon-type monster in your opponent's side of the field and graveyard. Now, that's super dope because, as we'll go on to see, Buster Blader will be able to gain a lot of attack points because all of your opponent's monsters will be dragons at some point or another. Next, I like to run 3 copies of Buster Blader, the Destruction Swordmaster. And this thing is super dope too. Its effect is this card's name becomes Buster Blader while it is on the field or in the graveyard. If a monster or monsters your opponent controls is destroyed by battle or card effect and sent to the graveyard, you can target one of those destroyed monsters equipped to this card. Once per turn, you can send one monster card you control that is equipped to this card to the graveyard. Destroy all monsters your opponent controls with the same type as that monster to the graveyard. So it's super dope because if you manage to destroy one of your opponent's monsters, chances are most of your opponent's monsters are going to have the same type. So it's a built-in Raigeki, built-in sweeper of your opponent's monsters. Next are the Whelp cards. I like to run 3 copies of Buster Whelp, Dragon Buster Destruction Sword. So this is super dope too because its effect is you can target one Buster Blader you control, equip this monster from your hand or field to the target. While this card is equipped to a monster, your opponent cannot special summon monsters from the extra deck. While this card is equipped to a monster, you can special summon this card. You can only use this effect once per turn. Now, this thing is broken because if you go first, you want this equipped to something. You can just shut down everything your opponent does first turn just by getting this to be equipped to one of your monsters. So next, I like to run 3 copies of Buster Whelp of the Destruction Swordman. Now, this thing is, its effect is when this card is normal summon, you can add 1 Destruction Sword card from your deck to your hand, except Buster Whelp of Destruction Swordman. You can only use one of the following effects of Buster Whelp of the Destruction Swordman per turn, and only once that turn. So the first bullet point says that you contribute this card, special summon 1 Buster Blader from your hand or graveyard, which is really dope because it speeds up the Buster Blader process. If something like this wouldn't exist, it'd be really hard to get Buster Blader out on the field. And the second bullet point says, if this card is in your graveyard and you control Buster Blader, you can discard 1 Destruction Sword card and you can special summon this card. So it's really easy if you control a Buster Blader card to special summon this, and then immediately, because it is a tuner, you can go into your synchro summons. So that's also really dope. Next, I like to play 1 copy of Wizard Buster Destruction Sword. This card's effect is you can target 1 Buster Blader you control, equip this monster from your hand or side of the field to the target. Well, this card is equipped to a monster. Monsters in your opponent's graveyard cannot activate their effects. So talk about shutting your opponent down even more. You can stop them from special summoning, and you can stop them from using graveyard effects in the same turn, essentially, if you manage to get the right hand. So next, I like to run 3 copies of Tenyi Spirit Adhara. This card I just use as a body. So if you control no effect monsters, you can special summon this card from your hand. And that's super dope because if I'm going first or whatever during my first turn, or I happen not to have a monster on the field, easy way to special summon something. Then if I get another summon off, it's usually helps enough to get a synchro summon off because it is a tuner. Next, I like to run 2 copies of Gamma Seal. I only run these for removal purposes. It's very, very hard for this deck to come across something that it can't remove, but sometimes there are situations that you need it for. So that's why I make sure to run this thing. Next are the spell cards. I like to run 3 copies of Emblem of Dragon Destroyer. This thing is pretty self-explanatory. Its effect is you can add 1 Buster Blader from your deck or graveyard to your hand. So it's a very easy way to search your Buster Blader, very easy way to recycle your Buster Blader. Next, I like to run 3 copies of Destruction Swordman Fusion. Destruction Swordman Fusion has a good effect as well. You can fusion summon 1 fusion monster that lists Buster Blader as material from your extra deck using monsters from your hand or either side of the field as fusion materials. If this card is in your graveyard, you can send 1 card from your hand to the graveyard and add this card to your hand. So this card is very easily recyclable, and on top of that, you can use monsters from either side of the field. So as we'll see, this is actually really dope with other combos. Next, I like to play 1 copy of Cards of Consonance. Honestly, I would recommend running this at 2, but I only have 1. So for now, I only play the 1. I will pick up a second one, and I will be putting that in this deck. I also like to play 1 copy of 1 for 1. Pretty self-explanatory. I can get one of my level 1s out there. Monster Reborn to bring back any of my destroyed monsters. And then Foolish Burial for getting my monsters into the graveyard for activating effects. Mostly, I'm going to be using it for Buster Whelp. Next are the trap cards. I like to run 1 copy of Destruction Sword Memories. Destruction Sword Memories effect is you can discard 1 Destruction Sword card, special summon 1 Buster Blader monster from the deck. You can banish this card from your graveyard, fusion summon 1 Buster Blader, the Dragon Destroyer Swordsman, from your extra deck by banishing materials listed on it from your graveyard. Now, I only play 1 of these just because it's a trap card. If this was a spell card, it would be super quick. I would probably be running 3 of these. But you have to discard this Destruction Sword card, meaning you have to have 1 in your hand for you to be able to use it. Most of the time you will, don't get me wrong, but it's a trap card and that makes it a little bit slow. So I only run 1 of those. Next, I like to run 2 copies of Destruction Sword Flash. Its effect is, if you control a fusion monster that lists Buster Blader as material, banish all monsters your opponent controls. When a card or effect that activated that targets a Buster Blader monster you control, except during the damage step, you can banish this card from your graveyard and negate the effect, and if you do, destroy that card. So this card is really, really dope because it just gets rid of everything. But the condition is you have to control a fusion monster that lists Buster Blader. That most of the time will happen, but just on the off chance that it doesn't, I only run 2 just because of that. So next, I also like to run 3 copies of Prologue of the Destruction Swordman. Its effect is you can send 1 Destruction Sword card and 1 Buster Blader monster from your deck to the graveyard, except Prologue of the Destruction Swordman. Special summon 1 Buster Dragon from your extra deck or a graveyard, but destroy it during the end phase of the next turn. You can banish this card from your graveyard. This turn, Destruction Sword cards you control cannot be destroyed by battle card effects. You can only activate 1 of these per turn. This is really dope because it allows you to pretty much instantly summon your Synchro monster. So it's really dope. Next, I like to play 2 copies of DNA Surgery. DNA Surgery, this is dope because I can select 1 type of monster, and as long as this card remains on the field, all face-up monsters will be to that type. So I'm obviously going to be selecting Dragon pretty much every time. And then once I select Dragon, I can actually use a couple different things. So my favorite, though, is using it with Destruction Swordman Fusion. So since I can use Destruction Swordman Fusion, I can then, from either side of the field, then I can go into my boss monster, essentially, which is Buster Blader, the Dragon Destroyer Swordsman, which just takes a Buster Blader and a Dragon-type monster. So if I take the Dragon-type monster from my opponent's side of the field, which it will be a dragon, by the way, I can get rid of pretty much anything my opponent has, and I can summon my boss monster at the same time. So it's a pretty good combination. Next, I like to run 2 copies of Trap Trick. I only run it at 2 because I would have to banish some of my cards. I don't like doing that as much. I'm going to experiment with it at 3, and I'll let you guys know if it's any good. But this allows you to pretty much search any of your trap cards. You banish 1 of them, and then you can search another copy of it. And then you can set it and use it immediately. So it's really, really good. Next, I like to run 2 copies of Mirror Force. I'm switching this out more recently. A lot of my Mirror Forces I switch out for Infinite Impermanence. This deck really does need some negation, and it is a normal trap card. So you can essentially search it with Trap Trick. But sometimes I feel like I need Mirror Force. Sometimes I feel like I need Infinite Impermanence. So for now, I have Mirror Force in here, but I usually have Infinite side decked, and depending on the deck, I just switch them out. So that's up to you guys. And then for the extra deck. So for the extra deck, there isn't too many cards in this archetype, so I don't use too much for the extra deck, but it's definitely good enough to work. I like to run 3 copies of Buster Blader, the Dragon Destroyer Swordsman, as mentioned before. This thing takes a Buster Blader and a Dragon-type monster. So its effect is it must be fusion summoned. It cannot be special summoned by any other ways. This card cannot attack directly, but this card gains 1,000 attack and defense for each Dragon-type monster your opponent controls or is in their graveyard. Now that works really, really well with the trap card I had just showed you earlier. As soon as I can find it, DNA Surgery, and then it also works really well with the Synchro monster I'll show you up next. But Change all Dragon-type monsters your opponent controls to defense position. Also, Dragon-type monsters in your opponent's possession cannot activate this effects. If this card attacks a defense position monster, inflict piercing battle damage to your opponent. So this thing's attack is just going to keep on climbing. And on top of that, everything your opponent has will go to defense mode, and their effects will all be negated. So that's really, really dope. And it combos really well with my next extra deck card, which is Buster Dragon. So I run 3 copies of Buster Dragon. It takes 1 tuner plus 1 non-tuner monsters. Its effect is all monsters your opponent controls become dragons. So that's how that is going to pair really well with this. And secondly, if you do not control a Buster Blader monster, you can target 1 Buster Blader in your graveyard, special summon it. So that's really, really dope because it lets you bring back certain Buster Blader monsters. Once per your opponent's turn, a quick effect, you can target 1 Buster Blader monster you control, equip it with a Destruction Sword monster from your graveyard. So you could really get away with summoning, if you have a Buster Blader monster on the field, you could essentially summon it with something like this, or you could equip it with something like, something like this. You can negate, you can stop them from using graveyard effects, you can stop them from special summoning from the extra deck. So it's a really good combo for negations. Next, for the extra deck, I like to run 1 copy of Red Heart Dragon Archfiend Abyss. This isn't something I pull out too often, but it takes 1 tuner and 1 non-tuner Dark Dragon Synchro monster. So if I happen to have this on the field, and by any chance I don't have this on the field at the same time, this essentially becomes useless. It becomes useless in the sense that it can't combo with this. So depending on the circumstance, sometimes I will like to tune and go straight into this. And this effect is, you can target 1 face-up card your opponent controls. Quick effect, negate its effects until the end of this turn. When this card inflicts battle damage to your opponent, you can target 1 tuner in your graveyard, special summon it in defense position. You can only use each effect of Red Dragon once per turn. So that's also really good. And lastly, I like to play 1 copy. I only play 1 because I only have 1. I would probably play 2 of these. Protector Whelp of the Destruction Swordman. This thing only takes 2 monsters, so it's just generic. Its effect is, if this card is link summoned, you can send 1 Destruction Sword card from your deck to the graveyard. Then you can special summon 1 Buster Blader monster from your hand. At the end of the battle phase, if your opponent controls no monsters, you can target 1 Buster Blader monster you control that did not declare an attack this turn, inflict damage to your opponent equal to that monster's attack. You can only use each effect of this card once per turn. So this is dope because most of the Destruction Sword trap cards all have graveyard effects, so it's a good way to get that off, and then you can special summon Buster Blader, or anything that counts as Buster Blader. And then if this is summoned first turn, obviously you're not going to attack, but it's a good way to just get a sizable chunk out of your opponent's life points. So I really, really like this card. Anyways, guys, that was all for my Buster Blader deck build. If you like what you saw, please like, comment, and subscribe. And oh my goodness, look at the time.
It's time to do